All right, everybody. So get this. Today, we're going deep on some pretty wild AI research. Like it really gets to the core of something we've all wondered about. Can AI actually think the way we do? Like us humans.
Yeah, that's the big question, right? And this paper on the reasoning capacity of AI models and how to quantify it tries to tackle that by looking at how AI actually goes about solving problems.
And they did it by using a really interesting approach, this thing called positional bias. Can you break that down a bit for me?
Sure. So imagine you've got a multiple choice question, right? These researchers, they used a bunch of these questions together. It's called the GPQA benchmark. It's specifically made to test how well AI can reason. Now, if they start messing with the order of the answers, and they see the AI starts messing up consistently when the right answer is, say, in the last spot position D, that's a bit of a red flag.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see where this is going. It's like the AI might not be actually figuring out the answer using logic, but more like it's remembering where it saw the right answer before during its training.
Exactly. That's what we call memorization. And it's one of three big strategies these researchers found. It's like the AI is thinking, okay, I've seen this kind of question, and the answer was usually here, so I'll go with that.
Almost like taking a shortcut, right? Instead of working through the problem step by step, it's just relying on a pattern.
You got it. And the really cool part is the other two strategies they found also come into play. Reasoning and, well, sometimes the AI is just guessing.
So it's not so clear cut. Is the AI reasoning or not? It's more complex than that.
Absolutely. And this is where it gets super interesting. They were actually able to measure how much the AI is using each of these strategies for different problems.
Wow. So they could see, for example, sometimes the AI might be mixing memorization with a bit of reasoning, and sometimes it's mostly guessing.
You got it. One of the biggest things they found was just how much the AI relied on memorization, even when it was totally capable of reasoning. Seems like it's a really basic part of how these models deal with information.
That's pretty mind-blowing, especially when you think about how well AI can do on some tasks. Makes you wonder if we've been giving it too much credit for thinking like us.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. We tend to think that if AI can do something as well as a human, it must be thinking like a human too. But this research shows us that might not be the case at all.
Really challenges our assumptions about AI, doesn't it?
It totally does. And it brings up some really important questions about how we judge and understand what AI is doing. But before we get into that, I want to go back to this positional bias thing for a second. They found something really interesting when they looked closer at how it affects the AI.
Ooh, lay it on me.
Well, it turns out the AI had a real dislike for position D, the last answer choice. Even when they shuffled all the answers around, AI kept having trouble when the right answer ended up there.
So even when they took away that pattern, the AI still had this kind of block about position D.
Right. It suggests maybe the AI is picking up on things during training that go beyond just where the answer is. Like maybe there's something about how the data is organized or the kinds of questions that are usually asked. That leads to this weird bias.
Like a hidden layer of influence that we're only just starting to see. Kind of creepy, isn't it?
Yeah, a little. But it also shows us just how complicated these AI models are and how much we still don't get about how they learn and make decisions. But finding this out is huge. It gives us a new way to figure out what's going on inside AI.
It's like we're getting a peek behind the curtain, right? Seeing into the black box.
Exactly. And what we're finding is that how the AI thinks is way more intricate than we first thought. There's this whole dance going on between memorization and reasoning and even a bit of guessing. It's not just a straight line. It's way more like a back and forth.
I'm really curious to hear more about how these strategies all work together. Can you talk more about that?
Of course. And this is where stable attractors come in.
Okay, hit me with it.
All right, so picture this. You've got a landscape, right, with valleys and peaks. As the AI is processing information, it tends to settle down into those valleys, which represent different mixes of the strategies.
So it's not just randomly picking between memorizing, reasoning, and guessing. There's a pattern to which strategy or combo of strategies it goes for.
Exactly. And those valleys, or stable attractors, are affected by what we feed into the AI. It's like the way we ask a question or set up the information we give it can actually push it toward a certain valley, a certain way of thinking.
Whoa. You mean we can actually guide how the AI reasons just by changing how we interact with it?
That's what the research is showing. And it leads to some really cool techniques like chain of thought prompting. But before we get into that, let's just take a second to think about what we've learned so far. This whole thing about stable attractors shows us the AI's reasoning isn't as simple as we might have thought.
Yeah, it's like we've been picturing AI as this super logical machine, but really it's being influenced by all these different factors working together.
Right. And understanding how complex it is super important if we want to build AI that we can actually trust and rely on.
Totally. We need to go beyond just, did it get the right answer, and start digging into how it got there.
Couldn't agree more. And speaking of digging deeper, the researchers found something really interesting about how confident the AI is.
Okay, I'm all ears. What'd they find?
Well, they found that the AI could be super overconfident, especially when it was using memorization or guessing, like it was saying, I'm 100% sure this is right, even when it was just going off a hunch or a memorized pattern.
Yikes. That's a little scary. It's like a student who's totally bluffing their way through a test.
Huh, great analogy. And it raises some serious red flags about whether we can really trust AI, especially for really important stuff like healthcare or finance.
This is all so fascinating, but I think my brain needs a little break to process all of
I
this.
hear you. This is a lot to take in. We've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive, and there's still so much more to explore. Welcome back. I'm sure you've had some time to mull over all that stuff about AI reasoning.
Yeah, no kidding. It's a lot to get your head around. But that's what I love about these deep dives. We really get down into the weeds of these crazy complicated topics.
Totally. And what we've found so far is just the beginning. This research has really opened up a whole new way to think about AI and what it can do.
You said earlier the researchers were actually able to measure how much the AI uses each of these strategies. Can you tell me a little more about that? How do they actually figure that out?
Well, they came up with this pretty sophisticated mathematical model. It analyzes how the AI does across a ton of different questions. By looking at the patterns of right and wrong answers, they can kind of separate out how much is from memorization, reasoning, and guessing.
So it's not just watching how the AI behaves. They're using data and algorithms to really dissect its thinking.
Exactly. It's like having this microscope that lets us zoom in on the AI's thought processes. And what they found is the AI isn't just switching back and forth between these strategies, it's more like a spectrum.
So it's not, okay, now I'm memorizing, now I'm reasoning. It's more fluid.
Right. It's this dynamic interplay between the different strategies. And the interesting thing is they found the AI often used a combo of two strategies together.
So like a mix of memorization and reasoning, or reasoning with a bit of guessing thrown in.
Exactly. And one thing that really jumped out was memorization was almost always involved, even when the AI was showing it could definitely reason.
So even when it's thinking logically, there's still this undercurrent of pattern recognition from its training data.
Right. It's like memorization is the base and the other strategies are built on top of it. It's pretty fascinating, but also kind of freaky when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. It makes you wonder if there's like a built-in limit to how much we can separate these processes in AI.
That's a question researchers are trying to figure out right now. Is this reliance on memorization just a fundamental part of how these models learn, or can we change it with new training methods?
That's going to have huge implications for how we build and test AI in the future, right?
For sure. If we want AI to really reason like us, we need to learn how to boost that ability. And at the same time, figure out how to reduce its dependence on just memorizing stuff.
It's like we need to teach AI not just to see patterns, but to actually get the concepts behind them.
Exactly. We got to move past the tricks and focus on building systems that can really learn, adapt, and handle new situations.
So this research is really making us rethink what thinking even means for AI.
Definitely. It's challenging all our assumptions and forcing us to come up with new ways to understand and measure AI's cognitive skills.
We've talked a lot about the technical side of this research, but I'm curious about the real-world implications too. Like, what does this mean for actually using AI out there in the world?
That's a great question. I think one of the big takeaways is how important transparency and control are. If we're going to let AI make decisions that affect us, we need to be able to understand how it's making those decisions.
So it can't just take the AI's word for it. We need to be able to look under the hood and see the reasoning process.
Exactly. Imagine an AI system that's helping doctors diagnose patients. If we know it's relying a lot on memorization, we might want to be a little more careful about what it's recommending, especially if it's a case that AI hasn't seen before.
Makes sense. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, AI, you're great at patterns, but this one's a little weird, so let's double check.
Right. And the same goes for other fields like finance. An AI managing investments might be making decisions based on what's happened in the past. But in a market that's always changing, those trends might not be so reliable anymore. We got to make sure the AI is adapting, not just blindly following memorized patterns.
So this research is a bit of a warning sign. It's saying we can't just assume AI is thinking like a human. We need to be more critical about how we assess it.
I think that's a good way to put it. This research is pushing us to ask some tough questions about how we build, use, and even regulate AI. It's about making sure AI is used for good and that it benefits everyone.
You brought up chain of thought prompting before. Can you explain what that is and how it fits into all of this?
Sure, chain of thought prompting is this really cool technique. It basically involves guiding the AI's reasoning by giving it a series of steps to follow.
So instead of just asking the AI question, we break it down into smaller chunks.
Exactly. And by doing that, we can kind of nudge the AI toward a more logical step-by-step way of thinking, instead of just relying on pattern recognition.
It's like we're teaching the AI to be a detective putting clues together to crack a case.
Perfect analogy. And this approach has actually been pretty successful at making AI better at reasoning and solving tough problems.
That's really exciting. Sounds like chain of thought prompting could be a big deal for creating AI we can really trust.
I think it has a ton of potential. It's still a new area, but it's a big step toward bridging the gap between how AI thinks now and how we humans reason.
This whole conversation's been so eye-opening. I'm seeing AI in a totally new light. It's not just about algorithms and data. It's about understanding the thinking processes behind how it behaves.
I'm glad to hear that. And we've really just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore about how AI reasons and what it means for the future.
Well, I'm ready to keep digging, but I think we've covered a ton in this part of our deep dive. Maybe it's time to switch gears and talk about what this all means for the future of AI.
Sounds good. Let's take a minute to collect our thoughts and then dive into the big picture implications of this research.
All right, we're back for the last part of our deep dive into AI reasoning. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around everything we've learned. It's crazy to think we can actually analyze how these AI models think.
Yeah, it really is pretty amazing. This research is like we can see right into the AI's mind and see how it makes sense of all the information and solves problems.
And the really interesting thing is it's not just about whether the AI gets the answer right or not. It's about understanding why it makes the choices it does, the strategies, and even how confident it is.
Right. We're going beyond just looking at how well it performs and digging into the actual thought processes behind how it acts. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion and seeing all the complexity underneath.
You mentioned before that this research has big implications for the future of AI. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah.
What are some of the key things we should be thinking about?
Well, I think one of the most important takeaways is the need for transparency. As AI becomes more and more a part of our lives, we need to be able to understand how it's making decisions, especially when those decisions have real consequences in the world.
So it's not enough to just blindly trust the AI. We need to be able to scrutinize how it's reasoning to see if it's really getting the problem or just falling back on memorized pattern.
Exactly. We need to develop tools and techniques so we can basically audit how AI makes decisions to make sure it's doing things in a way that aligns with our values and goals. This is especially important in areas like healthcare finance and self-driving cars.
Speaking of those areas, how do you think this research will affect how AI is developed and used in those fields?
I think it shows us we need to be more careful and thoughtful. We can't just throw AI at a problem and expect it to magically fix everything. We need to really think about the limitations of current AI systems, especially how much they rely on memorization and the potential for biases.
So, like in healthcare, we might need to be cautious about AI systems that diagnose patients just based on pattern recognition, without really understanding what's happening biologically.
Exactly. And in finance, we need to be aware of AI systems that make investment decisions based on past data, without taking into account unexpected events or changes in the market.
It's like we need to have a healthy skepticism about AI, to recognize that it's a powerful tool, but one that has to be used responsibly and with a clear understanding of its limitations.
I completely agree. This research is a wake-up call. It's telling us to be more critical and careful about how we build, evaluate, and use AI systems.
This brings us back to that big question we started with. Can AI really reason like us?
Yeah, it's a question that still fascinates and challenges us. This research suggests that while AI systems can do some pretty impressive things, they often rely on strategies that are different from how humans reason. They can be biased, overconfident, and tend to favor memorizing over truly understanding.
But doesn't that mean there's hope for the future? If we can understand these limitations, we can work on making AI systems that overcome them, AI that's capable of deeper, more nuanced reasoning.
Absolutely. This research isn't meant to say AI is bad. It's more like a call to action. It's encouraging us to dig deeper and explore new ways to train and evaluate AI, and ultimately to create systems that are truly intelligent, reliable, and align with human values.
It's a really exciting time to be working in this field. We're at the very beginning of a technological revolution, and research like this is helping us figure out how to get to a future where AI can really boost and enhance what humans can do.
I totally agree. The road ahead is full of challenges, but also incredible possibilities. And by understanding the ins and outs of how AI reasons, we can unlock its full potential and create a future where AI is a force for good in the world.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about. This has been an amazing deep dive into the world of AI reasoning, and I'm personally walking away with a whole new appreciation for how complex and powerful this technology is.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you, and I hope our listeners have enjoyed this journey as much as we have.
A huge thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this intellectual adventure. We'll be back next week with a brand new deep dive into another fascinating topic. Until then, keep those brains buzzing.